Alexandra, I hate to tell you this, but you accidentally stole someone's bike.
Whoa!
You're listening to the Minimalist Podcast with Joshua Fields Milburn and TK Coleman.
Thank you, Malabama. Ryan Nicodemus is going to be joining us here in a little bit. Hello, everybody. Coming up today on this free public minimal episode, a caller has a question about some hidden emotional clutter that surfaced after a failed attempt at a good deed. And another listener has a question about whether hoarding is a form of procrastination. Then we've got our lightning round segment, a FAM's question, and a listener tip for you. You can check out the full 2-hour, almost 3-hour Maximal edition of episode 427, where we answer 5 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalists. Your support keeps our podcast 100% advertisement free because sing along at home, y'all. Advertisements suck. Let's start with our callers. If you have a question or a comment for our show, give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice recording right there from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. Our first question today is from Alexandra.
Hello, here's Alexandra, a patron from Poland. A month ago, while parking my bicycle, I found a good and probably expensive bicycle unlocked by a bicycle stand. My first thought was that somebody forgot to attach it, which had happened to me earlier. So I used my lock to attach this other bicycle and left a note with my phone number. Days passed and the note was still there, but no one called. So I called the police to inform them I had found a bike. They came and checked the database and the bicycle and told me it hadn't been registered as stolen. And because of this, they couldn't take it. So they gave it back to me and told me I could leave it as I found it, unlocked. For me, it was a shame because it would be stolen in seconds by another person. But what does stolen even mean if I'm not the owner? As it was raining for days, I felt pity that the bicycle would get damaged, so I put it in the basement. I found charity organizations that take care of unwanted bikes. However, in the form I need to fill in, I must acknowledge that the bicycle is mine or that I have permission from the owner to donate it. I looked up the services offered by the city and they can take care of a bike when it is attached somewhere and not in use for more than 90 days. A small part of me wants to keep this bike if I don't find the owner and in exchange donate my own bike. But this feels like theft. I didn't have this thought initially and my initial intention was to find the owner. I guess I am overthinking this and not finding a more straightforward solution. It is not my bicycle, but somehow I took physical and mental possession of it. I believe it is better if it is returned to the owner, but I need to figure out how to identify and reach that person or donate it to a better cause. What would you do in my place? Was it better not to react and leave something that is not mine like I found it? Thank you for the value your work is bringing into my life.
Alexandra, I hate to tell you this, but you accidentally stole someone's bike.
Whoa! Whoa! What an opening line. You blew me away with that. I wasn't expecting that.
Do you disagree with me? Notice I said accidentally.
I don't think we have enough information to determine that. But before I even get into that, I want to hear the full train of thought here.
Well, my full train of thought is this isn't actually a stolen bike problem. It is an emotional clutter problem. It's an emotional problem because she is tethered to this bike now in some sort of emotional way, and she's uncertain. Uncertainty is an emotion. There's a little bit of fear in this as well. I'm sure we'll talk a bit about fear today as well. It's one of those emotions that clutter everything that we're doing. There's some insecurity here. Did I make the right decision? What should I have done? What would you have done in my shoes? And the truth is, yeah, I wouldn't have done the same thing that she did. I wouldn't have taken someone else's bike that was out there, even though I know that someone else might steal it. I don't think the remedy for that is for me to then steal the bike in a virtuous way. However, I'm not blaming her The problem at this point is an emotional one. And the reason I wanted to address this question first today is because you just finished writing your book, Emotional Clutter. And so I thought you would have some insights about this, which, by the way, Alexandra will send you a copy of Emotional Clutter if you want the audiobook version, or you can download the ebook version for free over on our website, theminimalists.com/emotional clutter. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Anyone can download that ebook for free. And TK, you did such a great job with the book, and I thought you might have some insights about some of this emotional clutter that she's picked up that's actually forcing her to hold on to this thing that isn't even hers in the first place.
Sure. I mean, emotional clutter in part refers to the optional baggage that we carry. I call it optional baggage rather than unnecessary baggage because optional simply means that you have the power to let it go. And this is an observation that can be made without blame, without condemnation, without any judgments built into it about how much you should have known or you should have known better kind of thing. So an example of that could be something like, hey, should I have done this differently? Suppose the answer to that question is yes. Suppose I have an airtight argument that proves that you should have done it differently. Well, the only thing you can do about that now is use that insight to determine how you will make choices going forward. But that insight won't benefit you at all if you turn it against yourself and use self-help as a form of self-hate. Oh, I'm such a naughty person for having done it that way. I mean, that might be a good virtue signal if the goal is to make ourselves appear like good people in front of others. It has performative value. But what good is that going to do you? It's going to make you feel bad. But unless that is translated into some practical action that expresses virtue, it's not very beneficial to you or to anyone else. It's a distraction from the real question, which is, how can I conduct myself in a way that is in accord with my highest values, right? And so you want to let go of any sense of self-condemnation regarding choices that have already been made that you can't do anything about. The question is, how can I take ownership of my choices and how can I make future choices that reflect the person that I want to be? I think there are two options here, or rather two possibilities here with the bike. Possibility number one is the person intends to come back to get that bike. At the moment that you see it and it's unlocked and you're worried that someone's going to steal it, two possibilities. One is the person who owns that bike intends to come back and retrieve it. Possibility number two is before they are successful at retrieving it for whatever reason, someone else is going to come along and retrieve it. Person number one took the risk. The person whose bike it is took the risk of possibility number two when they chose to put it there without locking it up. We don't know why they took that risk. It could be that they have some really smart reason for it. It could be that they have a terrible reason for it, but without filling the gaps in with presumption, we just don't know. And so you can leave it there and let them come back and take it. Or if you're convinced that they're never going to come back, someone else is going to take it. Why force yourself to be that someone else? You're not obligated to do that. It's not to say that you're wrong to do it, but you're not obligated to do it. And if this thing is stressing you out, one thing that you could do here is you could simply take the bike there. And if you're willing to put some time into this, you can take the bike back. You can do what you did the first time. And so I'm going to leave it there with my contact information on it for a few days. And if I don't hear anything from anyone, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to unlock it and I'm going to let it be in the position that it was in. And someone's going to take it, and whoever takes it, that's going to be the possessor of the bike. That's really not that different pragmatically from you taking it and putting it somewhere else. Because if that person never comes back, it's just an available bike for someone who takes it. But I think it's optional of you living this life where this bike that you don't even want is stressing you out because of assumptions you're making about what the owner is thinking and what other people are going to do. I don't think that's something that you have to entangle yourself in.
But what she's saying now is also like, oh, maybe I should keep the bike and get rid of my old bike. And I think that's where it becomes more of a problem. Because then you start to question, okay, was this your intention all along? And Alexandra, I can tell from your voice this was not your intention. Yeah. But now at this point, it does become bike theft if you've picked up their bike and you've held on to it.
Yeah.
The problem is this was never your problem in the first place. Other people's problems become your problem only when you pick them up, and you chose to go in there and pick up this problem. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Sometimes we want to help other people out. However, there is a big problem with the desire to be the savior of everyone else, to solve everyone else's problems. I wrote this essay a while ago. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's called The Advice Epidemic. It's one of my favorite things I've ever written. And there's a line in there, and it says, "There is no bigger ego than that of the helper. The helpful man simply cannot help himself. He feels obligated to tear an eagle from the sky, to save it from falling, to drag a dolphin to shore, to rescue it from drowning." And that's what we're often doing sometimes. Oh no, that dolphin's going to drown if I don't save it. Well, no, there's nothing for me to save there. In fact, quite often my desire to help in those scenarios simply makes the situation worse. And that's accidentally, I think, what happened here. Is I really wanted to help. I didn't want this person's bike to get stolen, so I removed the bike. I didn't steal it. I removed it from its location. We start to get in these semantic games, but the same outcome happened. The bike is now gone. That person, if they are coming back for that bike, it's not there. And you took the bike. You meant to help, but you accidentally stole it in the process. TK, I totally agree with what you're saying, though. What is done at this point. What can I do now to A, not pick up this or not continue to carry this problem with me? And B, what can I do to mend the problem that I have now contributed to by removing the bike from the scenario?
That's right. And I'm a fan of the instinct to help, so long as we're willing to be held accountable for feedback from others regarding the actual outcomes generated by our efforts to help. I was in the shopping mall one time. I went to the bathroom, and there in the stall, I saw a wallet sitting there, like by where, over the container where the toilet paper is. And after I finish using the bathroom, I decide I'm going to try to find the owner of this wallet. I look in the wallet and I see like stacks of cash. There are several $100 bills. This is a lot of money, man. Credit cards and all that stuff. And I see that there's an ID in there too. And so what I do is I go find an officer doing security in the mall. And I share with him what I found. And he opens it up and looks and he says, "Oh, I know this guy. Come with me." And so we walk together and we go into the food court, and there's this ice cream shop. And the officer calls the owner by name and he says, "Hey, this young man here found your wallet." And the guy goes, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much." And the officer gives him the wallet, and the officer stands there for a second. I stand there and he goes, "Thank you." And the officer looks at me. He goes, "I'm sorry, man. He could have at least gave you an ice cream cone." And I go, "It's all good, man. I did it because it was the right thing." Sometimes that instinct to intervene and say, if I don't do something about this, someone else may come along and do something about this, and they may have bad intentions. Sometimes that instinct can create a lot of good. And so I want to commend you doing the best that you can to try to create a good outcome. Sometimes in life, we got to make judgment calls. You find a $20 bill on the ground. We don't have perfect information. We don't always know what to do, but it's good to try to do the right thing. But once you make a choice, the important thing is that you just got to line your energy up with that choice, and you can't live in the past, and you can't rack your brain analyzing over and over again all the different ways that you might have done it or that you should have done it. Just learn what you can from what you did and try to find the best way to move forward.
The question I often ask in those scenarios is, will my helping help or will it hurt? And unfortunately, sometimes when we try to interject ourselves into the problem, we try to pick up someone else's problem and solve it for them. What we do is we drag ourselves into their problem, into their version of hell. Yeah. And now we are being burned by that very same problem. So not only am I hurting other people with my help, I'm hurting myself by trying to help the people that didn't ask for my help in the first place. Helping can be wonderful if someone else wants your help, but simply going around looking to solve the problems like I'm Batman, it often causes more harm than good. Welcome back, y'all. We just got back from our pandiculation break. Joining us on the phone right now is my best friend, co-founder of The Minimalists, Ryan Nicodemus. Hello, Ryan.
What's up, y'all? Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome back to the show here. We got some great social media questions here. This first one is from YouTube. BL has a question for us.
Is hoarding just another form of procrastination?
Well, procrastination is a byproduct of all kinds of emotions that we experience. Emotional clutter, one might say. Ryan, we've been talking today about emotional clutter. TK has a new ebook out called Emotional Clutter. And what I've learned is that when I'm procrastinating about something, what happens? It's because of a story I'm telling myself. Oh, that's going to be too difficult. Or, oh, it's going to take too much time. And that difficulty or that too much time is going to lead to some other unpleasant emotions. So there's a weird sort of fear about what emotions I might experience if I actually sit down and do the thing that seems a bit unpleasant. What say you, Nicodemus?
Oh, man. I think we hoard for all different types of reasons. Certainly, there's emotional clutter that's involved there. You know, it's interesting, like the more I live my life with boundaries that I like honor, I realize there's like a freedom in kind of setting up routines. There's a freedom in setting up a limit with certain things in my life. And I think someone who is hoarding is at that level 3, level 4 hoarding. I mean, their life is out of control in a way, and they feel like it's out of control. And it is represented in the things that they hold on to.
I like what you're talking about with the limits here, because what you're talking about, hoarding is a limitless life. We've decided to not set up any boundaries, so we'll accept anything. We'll tolerate anything. And when you begin to tolerate the excess, of course, you get more of it.
That's right. You know, I think hoarding is to procrastination what animals are to tigers. It's the broader category into which that latter thing fits. And so we could say that procrastination can be construed as a form of hoarding, but there's more to hoarding than procrastination. The reason we can think about procrastination in terms of hoarding is because even though in procrastination it looks like we're letting go because we're putting off that thing we want to do until the next day or the next week, we're actually clinging to the comforts of the moment. We're clinging to the luxury and the perceived freedom of not having to do hard things now, right? And so that's a kind of hoarding, if you will. But it is not necessarily the case that all hoarding is procrastination, because there are some people with hoarding issues and they're trying very hard. They're not procrastinating at all. They're trying to unravel it. But there are other deep-seated issues there, some forms of psychological clutter that's holding them back from being free. There are various kinds of narratives that they're telling themselves. And so there's more to it than procrastination. And I think it's so important that when we consider the various stages of hoarding, some of which are more socially acceptable and less noticeable than others, that we don't oversimplify because it's somewhat of a complex problem, some forms needing professional treatment, but not all.
You know, what I've stopped doing is negotiating with myself on certain things that I've determined are non-negotiables. And it could be anything as simple as, like, if I want to get into the ice bath every day, right? It's no longer a choice. If I want to write every day, it is no longer a choice. If I want to record one podcast every week, it is no longer a choice. I simply get up and do it. And I no longer give myself the out. There is no exit ramp here, so I can't get off the highway without crashing. I simply do the thing that I've already committed myself to doing. I've taken the optionality off the table. And Ryan, it seems to me like that's kind of what you're talking about here. By putting these constraints or these limits around something, what I'm really saying is I don't have the option to hoard, or I don't have the option to procrastinate. I'm just going to do it this way.
Yeah. And, I want to like honor anybody's battle that they're going through and it's creating this urge to procrastinate, anyone who's feeling out of control. I know there are mornings where there are things that I need to do that I'm going to do. I'm not going to procrastinate. But if my mind is busy, it's certainly, especially with, my ADHD brain, it certainly takes longer for me to get things done. But I have found a tool which is real simple. Like Mariah and I, we will sit down in the morning. We'll have like a free 30 minutes and we put on the Bluetooth speaker some like really nice, soft, like lyrical music, just some nice soft music in the background and meditate. And sometimes we go 10 minutes, sometimes we go the full 30 minutes. But I'll tell you, like that little bit of time, I tell myself I'm going to do it for at least 5. I usually end up doing 10. But regardless, that 5 or 10 minutes, it gives me permission to like let go of all of those worries, to let go of all those angsts. And when Mariah and I are finished, it's a lot easier for me to focus and to stay on task.
What I hear you talking about is taking the first step towards something is often that most difficult step, right? Yeah. The most difficult thing about working out is actually going to the gym, not the workout itself, which seems paradoxical. But once you're already there, you might as well do it, right? And once you're already meditating, you might as well do it. Once you're writing, it actually can feel amazing after you've gotten past that procrastination stage. Once you're decluttering, you're getting rid of all of the excess stuff, you're actually finding the abundance beneath that. TK, I was struck by the first line from your new book, Emotional Clutter. It is, minimalism isn't scarcity, it is abundance healthfully expressed. So hoarding is superabundance, dysfunctionally expressed, right? Minimalism is the opposite of that. It's not about getting rid of everything. It's about expressing your abundance in a healthy way. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. One of my favorite economic insights by Friedman is that instead of opting for a system that depends on a good person running it, you want to choose systems that incentivizes even the bad person to do the right thing. And I think at an individual level, that's an approach we can take in our own lives. Instead of building systems that only work when we can show up as our best selves, why not adopt a system that will work for you even on your worst day of the week? And so the benefit of Ryan's start small suggestion is that it's something that you can do even when you're having a bad day. The healthful expression of abundance isn't about getting rid of everything that you can conceivably get rid of, because that becomes just another form of compulsion. Minimalism, too, can be approached in a way that is unhealthy, right? But it's about looking at what matters most to you, asking yourself, how can I optimize for that? And the necessary consequence of your answer is looking for ways to eliminate the excess, because excess is simply that which gets in the way. But it makes no sense to speak of that which gets in the way if we have not identified the destination that we seek, the values that we want to move towards.
Ooh, nothing gets in the way if you don't have a way in which you're going in the first place.
Yeah.
Alabama, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round, where we answer your questions from TikTok.
Yes, indeed. You can follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and Threads. We are at The Minimalists on all of those platforms. Also, Ryan Nicodemus is here, so you can check him out at ryannicodemus.com. You can sign up for his monthly mentoring messages. Those are free over there. He'll send you a nice email each month. Now, during the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds to answer your question with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We call them minimal maxims, and we put these minimal maxims in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast, so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. By the way, we catalog all of those minimal maxims on one website, minimalmaxims.com. You can just refresh it. It gives you a new minimal maxim every day. It's a great way. I've seen thousands of people who set up their desktop so that, or their browser, it's the first window that they pop open. It's just a nice little quote to start their work week off or their work day off with a bit of simplicity. By the way, we'll email you all of our weekly minimal maxims. Every episode is filled with like a dozen minimal maxims. We'll email those to you each week if you sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.email. We'll send you our show notes. We won't send you spam or junk or advertisements. Today's TikTok question is from Poppy.
My boyfriend gets angry whenever I try to convince him that we need to declutter. How can I teach him to minimize without reacting emotionally?
Uh-oh. Ryan, what say you about reacting emotionally?
Oh man, my pithy answer is this. True freedom stands beyond the need to convince others. And Poppy, I understand what you're going through. You're living with someone who maybe is a little messier than you, hoards a little bit more than you, and it's a little frustrating. But trying to convince someone that you're living with, trying to convince them that they need to declutter, well, when you try to convince someone, that's not really gaining their consent. A man convinced against his will is still of the same opinion. Still, we've used that several times on this podcast and it still holds true. So the question is why is he getting angry? He's getting angry because he's not being seen. And what is not being seen, Poppy? I think that is where you're going to get the gold out of this relationship, is trying to see really what is triggering that anger, honoring that, respecting it, holding space for it, and working together to get your place tidied up.
TK, what say you?
All right. You can't teach someone if you're not willing to become their student. There's an Indian proverb that says, once you've cut off a person's nose, there's no use in giving them a rose to smell. You know, communication is about more than just my words or the intentions behind them or how good I feel about the way that I'm delivering them. It's also about the result I'm creating through the way I'm treating you when I'm engaging you. And so it becomes important to not just think about the ideas that I want to convey or the way that I want to influence you, but I also have to pay attention to what's important to you, why it matters, and how what I want to say can be conveyed in a way that connects with that. And so if your goal is to influence someone with the insights of minimalism because of the way it's benefiting you, the question is not, how can I make you more minimalist? The question is, what do you want out of your life? And how can I support you by helping you introduce simplicity in those areas where stuff is getting in your way?
What I'm connecting here between both of you is, well, Ryan, I love what you said about anger and how that anger is really a result of him not feeling seen. And then what TK is saying is, well, instead of being the teacher, you might also need to be the student here. What can I learn from that anger? I can learn how to better see him. What is going on beneath this clutter? Maybe, yeah, it's emotional clutter because you're responding emotionally, but maybe it's simply that he doesn't feel like he's being respected or understood, or maybe he's just not ready. Poppy, how many years did it take you to finally start simplifying your life? Was it 2 decades, 3 decades? And expecting someone that you live with now to make a transformation overnight, is that a reasonable expectation? I've got something pithy for you, although I borrowed this from TK as well. This is from Emotional Clutter. He said, how do you teach a cork to float? The answer is simple. You don't. Teaching a cork to float is like trying to teach a bird to fly. A cork floats by its very nature. And I think the same thing is true with the human experience. We become so compelled by stuff because we don't see what else is compelling around us. Our material possessions are great when they enhance our experience of life, but when they get in the way, I can't teach someone how to enjoy the stuff that gets in the way. Can you talk to me a bit, TK, about that line and the idea of teaching a cork to flow? Because that's what it often feels like when we're trying to force decluttering onto someone else.
Yeah. So the purpose of that statement isn't to express a limitation about the teacher, i.e., you can't teach a cork, but it's to give you a sense of hope about the potential of the cork. The cork already has it in its nature to do the thing that you desire to to see it do. And so many times when we try to help people and we struggle to get them to be inspired or get them to change in the ways we want to inspire them or change them, we forget that this human being that we're dealing with already has more brilliance and more beauty than we can fathom. And our goal as educators, as teachers, as mentors, as influencers, as lovers, doesn't have to be about getting them to become brilliant and beautiful. It's about seeing what's already there and calling it forward more and more effectively. And I tell you, the way people respond when they feel like you are calling their beauty forward, when you are calling their brilliance forward, is very different than when they feel like you are talking to them as if they have no beauty or brilliance apart from what you can pour into them. And we often care about people in our lives, and we come off as if we don't care, or we come off as if we're being insensitive or condescending, not because we actually are those things, but because the other person feels like we're not taking the time to understand why something should matter to him. And so I actually commend the efforts here to try to influence, because I think what's happening is you're seeing some areas where he's struggling and you know you could help. But the way that you get there is that you spend some time talking to him, asking him some questions about what he wants out of life. Ryan actually has a very awesome exercise that he does with Mariah, where the two of them, they get together and they ask each other, hey, what are some areas in your life where you think you need to improve?
Yeah.
And man, like most people aren't given the opportunity to think about that. Ryan, I'm gonna pass the ball to you, man, because I want to hear you talk about the impact.
No,
that's had.
It's a great exercise. I mean, it was, I forget where we got it from, but it was these questions suggested to people in a relationship to ask each other each month. And none of them are accusatory. It all has to do with like what you said, TK, where it's, hey, what do you feel like you want to work on this month? How can I support you in working on that? And you know what? I don't really judge when Mariah says what she needs to work on, because if anything, I'm just grateful she's willing to share that with me, and it gives me an opportunity to give her support. And I don't, again, like judge her for the things that she wants to do. I just appreciate the opportunity.
What you're talking about here is trading in judgment for witnessing, for seeing someone where they are right now, flaws and all. Ryan, I got another question for you here in a moment. But first, real quick, for right here, right now, here's one thing, actually two things going on in the life of the minimalists. Ryan, December and January are always interesting times for the minimalists, a special time for the minimalists, really. You know, we started our blog back in 2010, December of 2010. We published our first book, Minimalism, in December of 2011, the very next year. And then we published our most popular book, Everything That Remains, in January of 2014. I don't know what it is about these months, December and January. It's like the endings and the new beginnings. Our second Netflix film, Less Is Now, was released in January 3 years ago, 2021. That's when we first dragged TK into the fold of what we were creating at the time. And that film went on to be nominated for an Emmy. And then we embarked on our longest ever tour back in 2014, which brings me to this right here, right now block. Our first TEDx talk, Ryan, is turning 10 years old this month.
Wow.
Happy birthday.
It was really our first creation that like reached millions of people. It was our first recorded talk ever. We had done different talks. We had never filmed or recorded anything. And I've been told by several different professors and college students that people now teach this at colleges about how to speak publicly, which is ironic because it was the first time we recorded a public talk of ours. But it's not ironic in the sense that, if you recall, Ryan, I think we practiced for over 100 hours.
Oh, yeah. You remember that, Mahalik? You were there helping us develop that talk.
Oh, yeah. I was just talking about that the other day to somebody, how long I spent helping you practice that.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was over 100 hours.
And you know what's interesting? I don't practice because it's like I want to just give a certain set of words. It's like I want to give the essence of something. And the more I practice, it's like if I get nervous during the talk, it's so ingrained in me. Like it doesn't matter how nervous I get, I can still find my way back on the path.
Well, what's funny is I couldn't imagine you guys in a million years practicing 100 hours to go give a talk now, because of course, when I met you, it's much further down the road. And when I've, been at live events with you, you guys just go out on stage and you crush it. And I'm sure there's some mental prep, right? Whatever it is you need to do to be in the zone. But the notion of practicing 100 hours for going on stage and doing what you do, that's hilarious to me, because I couldn't imagine it now. I guess it's evidence of how far you've come.
Well, there's also a secret here. If you watch that talk, so Ryan gave most of that talk and I spoke at the end. And then our second TEDx talk, which was in Fargo, it was sort of the inverse of that, where I gave a long talk and Ryan came in at the end. But that first one, which is called A Rich Life with Less, Professor Sean, if you put a link to that in the show notes, if folks want to check it out, millions of people have found value in it. But if you tune in at the end, I had terrible strep throat. This was the day before we went on our long 100-city tour. We were leaving Montana, driving to Florida, and I had developed this I couldn't talk at all. And I got this great advice from a friend of ours, Colin Wright. And he's like, I've had the same thing happen to me, but the adrenaline will open up your throat for about 10, 15 minutes. And that's all you're going to need. And it was true. I was able to get the words out. I could not talk at all before or after the talk, but during the talk, just enough words came out. And because, Ryan, you alluded to this, because we had practiced so much, it was almost like second nature. It was so ingrained in us. And there was some theatrics in it as well. There were us moving boxes around. And so it wasn't just...
I loved the box props. It was great.
It wasn't just a talk. There was some actual theatrics that went into the talk itself. But most of it was just practicing the talk over and over and over. And as we practiced, I hate that line, or that's a mixed metaphor, or what are we doing here? And that's silly. Let's get rid of that. You know what? We need to clarify this. We need to expand it more. And so part of that, the practicing, was also just a part of the creative process. Does that sound right, Ryan?
Yeah, it really does. And we even brought in, for the blocking and making sure that it looked good on stage, we brought in, I don't know if you remember, Rebecca Schaefer, who helped us with kind of fleshing all that stuff out. It was a lot of work, man, but totally worth it. I thought it was a beautiful production.
Yes, indeed. And then we went on tour right after that. I remember getting 4 cities into that tour, being like, what are we doing? We have 96 more cities to go.
Some of those cities were double headers.
Yeah, that's true. We did 119 events that year. This year, we're doing 7 events. It's called the Everything Tour. You can join the Minimalists for a simple living talk, a live reading, an audience Q&A, hugs, and much, much more of less. Tell your friends and family. You can bring someone who has never heard of minimalism. We're doing 7 cities across California. Orange County is this weekend. Then we've got Palm Springs, Ventura, Los Angeles, Fresno, San Diego, and San Francisco. Indie bookstores only. So we're kind of getting back to our roots there, Nicodemus. This is the men's 11th tour, the Minimalists 11th tour, but it is our first free tour since 2015. You can grab your tickets. Tickets are limited and they are going quickly because, they're free tour stops. So you can get your free tickets right now, theminimalists.com/tour. You can come to multiple events if you want. I just got a message from someone in France yesterday, said they're attending. Someone from Germany last week said they're attending. Someone else from Poland said they're coming. Someone from South Dakota said they're coming. So if you want to make a trip of it, you're certainly welcome to come to one or as many events as you'd like. Each one will be a bit different. It's called the Everything Tour, theminimalists.com/tour. Let's tune in to a FAMS question, Malabama. First Friday of every month, we do a Friday afternoon minimalist Zoom for our Patreon subscribers. And Malabama's there in the chat collecting your questions as we're talking to you on that Zoom call. Me and Nicodemus and Malabama's there, TK, Professor Sean, Danny Unknown, post-production. Peter is there as well. And Melanie had a question for us.
How can you maintain control of your space while moving an elderly parent or in-law into your home?
Nicodemus, you had to move your mom into your home for a month when she was visiting recently.
This is great.
But part of that is like maintaining control of your space, but to what extent, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really about finding out the space she needed and then making sure we had the space to accommodate. We found that out because she was late on her flight, but her bags arrived before her. So I went and picked those up and brought them back home and like unpacked everything for her and made the space for her. And, her and I worked together and Mariah to keep things nice and tidy. Our place is, I mean, for me and Mariah, it's great. Any more than 2 people in this place, we start to get on top of each other a little bit too much. But if everybody's working together and everyone has the right boundaries in mind, then things go pretty smoothly.
Yeah, it's not a tiny home, but it's a smallish home.
Yeah.
And what you've figured out there is sometimes boundaries are important. In fact, they sort of form the contours of the piece that you're going to have. And so if someone shows up into your space and you have no boundaries at all, you actually don't even have your own space, right? Your house has walls. Those are that's one boundary you can have, right? But then what space are you going to relegate the elderly in-law who's coming to live into your home? But also there are boundaries like, hey, this is our home and there are going to be certain things that here's how we do things here. And I'd simply ask that you are willing to respect those boundaries. I'm also thinking, TK, from a sort of, I don't know, maybe an Econ 101 perspective. Every benefit has a cost, but not every cost has a benefit. This phrase came to mind because if I'm going to benefit from something, it's going to cost me time, attention, energy, money, etc., right? But sometimes I'll spend my resources and not get any sort of benefit out of it. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. And the reason why we do that is because there is a distinction between actual and perceived benefits, right? Sometimes we believe that by spending our money a certain way, we're going to benefit, but we turn out to have been mistaken. Maybe we were lied to. Maybe there was false advertising. Maybe something was oversold to us. Maybe we miscalculated. And so that initial pleasure we got from acting in accordance with a perceived benefit is short-lived because the reality of having to live with or endure a situation turns out to be disappointing. That's exactly what's happening with impulse purchases. We're acting on perceived benefits that turn out to have a much more disappointing actuality. Another thing I'll say here is when it comes to this idea of maintaining control, the concept of maintaining control implies that I'm currently in control, but there's something about my situation that's getting ready to change, and I'm trying to figure out how I can continue being in control. And the first step to doing that successfully is acknowledging that change has occurred, accepting that change has occurred, and then recontextualizing your understanding of what you can control. The amount of control that you have when you are living by yourself is necessarily different than the amount of control you can have when another person enters the space. Necessarily so. So for instance, if you live by yourself and I come stay with you for a week, it is absolutely non-negotiably the case that the amount of control you have is going to decrease, even if only by a little. Why? Because there is a variable, an element of unpredictability that you can't account for. It may be the case that I snore and there's never been a basis for us having a conversation about that. It may be the case that I get up and go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. and I'm just loud enough, even with all of my politeness, to kind of wake you up. There are all sorts of things that I can bring to the table that introduce variables to the situation. And so if you want to maintain control, you have to redefine your understanding of what it is that's actually controllable. If you try to maintain the same amount of control while bringing in a new person into your space, you will resent them or yourself for the things that you can't stop from changing. And so instead of just saying, how can I maintain the status quo? You've got to ask yourself, what aspects of the things I previously controlled, what aspects of those am I willing to let go in order to satisfy the goals I have of playing this role in my loved one's life?
Yeah, what I hear you talking about, TK, is being flexible. And that's huge in a situation like this, because you're right. Like, no one is going to get everything they want, not the mother-in-law and not the family that the mother-in-law is living with. So the more flexibility that they allow in their situation, you're absolutely right, man.
And the more need for control makes you less flexible in the long run. And so maybe it's even giving up some of that need for control, controlling the things that don't really matter to you, giving that up so you can increase your flexibility. And it sounds like it's going to be a whole lot more pleasant for everyone involved. Nicodemus, we got several more things I want to talk to you about on the private podcast. But first, Alabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hi, my name is Sam Haas out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's really nice out right now. I'm walking to go do something. The birds are chirping. And no, I didn't write my message out because I don't care if it gets online or on the radio or on the podcast or not. This is a very heartfelt thank you that I want to give you guys. A couple of years ago, I was in treatment. And I've been, I had tried many times to get sober in my battle with alcoholism and then later on meth. And two things that have really helped me. I am a 12-step guy and also cognitive behavioral therapy. But the third essential component that really helped me, I saw your guys' one of your documentaries on Netflix, and that influenced me to get one of your books. And then I checked out your podcast. And, some people ask me, like, why are you so successful with, what was it for you that helped you get sober? I'm over 2.5 years sober now. And I usually tell them just two things, because the third one I don't know if they'll really get. But the first two I tell them is, well, I'm a 12-step guy, so working the 12 steps as a sponsor was helpful for me. It's not for everybody. Cognitive behavioral therapy really helps me. I know that's not for everybody. But the third one, I don't tell them as much because then it would take a lot more like explaining. But I'm like, Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua Fields Milburn, they're these two guys known as the Minimalists. And they were the third essential element for me that have helped me stay sober. So I just want to thank you guys for that. It means a lot to me. I hope you have a great day. Bye.
All right, y'all. We'll see you on Patreon for the full 2.5, almost 3-hour maximal edition of episode 427, which includes answers to a bunch more questions. Questions like, how do I let go of the good memories from the past so I can make room for the present moment? As a college student, how do I minimize all of the supplies I need for school? And what are the best ways to avoid consumerism after decluttering? Plus a million more questions and simple living segments, including a beautiful minimalist home tour from one of our listeners over on the Minimalist Private Podcast. Visit patreon.com/theminimalist or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. That could be Apple Podcasts or over there on Overcast, which is what I listen on, or your favorite podcast player. Also, you can check it out on the Patreon, brand new Patreon app that they have now as well. Beautiful Patreon app. However you want to listen to our private podcast, you can. You also get access to all of our archives, all the way back to episode 1, back in 2015. So that's a lot more of less. And Patreon is now offering free trials. So if you want to test drive our private podcast, you can join for 7 days for free. That is our minimal episode for today. If you leave here with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.